Hello my loves, I'm Luna, a 5-star astrologer and tarot reader, and today we're going to be taking a look at Timothee Chalamet. We're going to look at his birth chart, his transits, see what's coming up for him. We can also get some insight on what's going to be coming up for him and Kylie. We can take a look at his love transits, see if there's anything going on there, maybe an engagement. But he also just has so much going on with his career, and I want to take a look at what's going on there. Now, if you would like your own personalized reading, you can head on over to my Etsy shop. The link is in the description below for deeper insight into love, relationships, and your career. Now, I'm opening up the spots for this November, so be sure to book before that's gone. But also, a few of you have been asking me about when you kind of submit your questions for your reading. So you get 3 questions for your reading. That you feel you don't have enough space, that's perfectly fine. You can send me a message through Etsy messages. If you put your 3 questions and then you don't have enough characters to put everything you want, it's perfectly fine if you send me a message and then just give me all your context and your questions. I will address it in your reading. So just a little heads up for when you add to cart. Okay, so let's take a look at Timothy. So there's been a lot going on with him. He's been going through his Saturn return, which I can really anticipate has been pretty difficult for him, probably because he has a Moon-Saturn conjunction. So not only does he go through his Saturn return, he's also going through something called his Sati Sati. This is a Vedic term. I also offer a Vedic astrology reading. I am trained in Hellenistic, Vedic, and modern astrology, although I am primarily a modern astrologer and I use the Placidus house system. It is my bread and butter. It is what I feel most comfortable doing in terms of transits and such, but I also have a Vedic astrology offering if that's something that you're interested in. But this essentially means he's going through a very difficult time. This could be a bit of a dark night of the soul transit. Not only is he going through a Saturn return, which is just a time where you are facing a lot of your shadows, facing a lot of the karmic lessons of this life. In the sign of Pisces, this really takes it to another level. It could be kind of a spiritual experience, a time where you may be really dissolving the ego. What's his name? Justin Bieber has been going through his Saturn return as well. He's also been having Saturn on his sun, so a lot of men, Timothee Chalamet, Justin Bieber, they have not been in a super great place over these past 3 years, but Saturn will be leaving Pisces February of 2026. So I do think that the version of Timothy, his press tours are going to be starting soon. I think Dune's coming out at some point next year. Maybe I'm wrong. No, I think he is. I think I heard he shaved his head for that recently. But when we do see him come back on the scene and he starts making more promotional tours, I do think we're going to be seeing a very new and different Timothee Chalamet than the one that we've come to know. Also because he's going through Uranus on his 10th house, which is dramatically changing his public image. Now, this Saturn transit in Pisces, as I mentioned, it's a dissolution of the soul, a dissolution of the ego, and really about him getting closer to what it is that he's really after in this life. And with the Moon conjunction to Saturn, that's really tough. He's probably been in a bit of a depression for a while now. In the 7th house, this obviously is connected to his connection with Kylie. The 7th house is the house of relationships and partnership. So I do think that his relationship with Kylie has really challenged him in some way. I wonder if, with Pisces, we're dealing with blurring of boundaries, we're dealing with illusions. And with the Moon in Pisces, he's a very poetic and artistic and emotional man. Internally, he's very introspective and deep. I think that he's probably become even deeper during this time, which I think is one of the things we're going to notice about him when he comes back. He's always been a very intelligent man, but I think it's going to be something that we are recognizing a little bit more about him. Maybe we're going to see a slightly less goofy or silly version of him, and maybe a more deep, soulful version of him that is allowing him to open his heart in this new way. And I think that his relationship with Kylie has been really pressing on this wound of his tendency to really guard his very soft and mushy center, because Saturn here in Pisces, it's in the 7th house, which squares the midheaven. And so from this position, Saturn's actually squaring the angles of the chart. So when you go through Saturn transits to any of the angles, whether it be the ascendant, the descendant, the IC, or the MC, the very backbone of your life is restructured. And that means that everything you thought you understood about life, your priorities, who you thought you were, what you wanted in life, is being reorganized. And that's happening through relationships for him. And so I do know that he started dating Kylie during the beginning of his Saturn return, and that was a relationship that was very much under wraps, and he got a lot of flack for it, right? Saturn was squaring his midheaven. People are not loving his partnerships right now. But it's also about maturing, and Pisces has to do with boundary setting, and it has to do with the breaking of illusions. And there's something about being with Kylie that's quite karmic, and part of that karma, at least from the public sphere, is about him destroying some illusions about who the public believes that he is, especially with Uranus in the 10th house, which has been on his midheaven for a few years now. So he's been going through a little bit of maybe a little bit of a personality crisis when it comes to his public brand and his image in the public eye. And Kylie is a very big part of that with Saturn and Pisces. And conjunct his moon, that means that there is something that he is processing about who he really is at his deepest core and what it is that he truly loves and cares for, and who he is in the privacy of his life. His moon, technically by sign, squares his midheaven because he's got Gemini there. However, that means that even though he's quite joyful and fun, right? Gemini in the midheaven, we have it's that ability to be really childlike and funny and connect with audiences. There's a relatability to Timothy. He also is very private. He's got this moon here in Pisces. It's kind of like on the cusp of his 8th house. And there's a lot about him that we don't know. And there's a lot about him that Kylie seems to really understand and accept about him, that he feels like contradicts the version of himself that he has to be in the public eye. And so Saturn here has been really pushing him to create boundaries around how much of the illusions that he's built in his public sphere is he willing to dismantle in order to create stronger structures in his love life and in his relationships. So it's possible, also the 10th house is just, his career and his public aspirations. And then there could be something about the relationship with Kylie that has really pushed him to maybe keep the relationship, even if at times he might have typically let the relationship die at other times of his life. Maybe he would have prioritized his career above everything else, which I do think he is. However, it's squaring his midheaven, which means there's a bit of a conflict between a desire for commitment or maturing in relationships alongside changes and instability in his career, or a fast-moving pace in his career, especially with Uranus there. Now, the North Node joined Pisces this year. He's been having eclipses all over his moon, his Saturn, his 7th house. So I think some really, really big events have been going on in his relationship with Kylie. And if I do recall, I think this is the year that he made his relationship with Kylie pretty official. And I think he walked the red carpet with her. And so if we follow the data of what's been going on since these outer planets have been in his 7th house, because also Neptune has been in his 7th house for a long time, and will soon also be exiting Pisces for the first time in the last 10, 11 years or something like that. So I do think that if we follow that through line, it seems like he is moving towards a time where he is going to start protecting, prioritizing, and legitimizing his relationship with Kylie. Now that could be an engagement, but it could also just mean that he's going to be less. Again, with Saturn, we're dealing with control issues. It's been squaring his midheaven, and Uranus has been on his midheaven, which has been really pushing him to get outside of his comfort zone when it comes to what he thinks he's allowed to do in the public eye. And that could also manifest as him taking roles that maybe he wouldn't usually, or experimenting in the public eye, or experimenting with versions of himself or characters that he's never played before. But with Saturn there, it has been really pushing on control issues around wanting to keep his relationship separate from his public image, or fearing how his relationship may intervene in his career. And that has been a very big conflict that he's been dealing with throughout his Saturn return. But Saturn has also been squaring his natal Pluto in the 4th house. So there's been some significant instability and difficulty in his home life and his family life. I'm not sure how this is manifesting, but I will tell you he's been in a bit of a depressive episode. And with all the eclipses going on in his 7th house and on his Saturn, it seems like the relationship with Kylie has strengthened because she's been around and holding the fort a little bit during periods of his life that have been very difficult. And sometimes there is that sense of growing up, facing a lot of the real harsh, worst sides of life alongside someone that really kind of can legitimize a connection. Pluto in the 4th house, that sometimes can manifest as maybe he's been homesick, maybe he's been feeling like he doesn't have a home, maybe there's been family stuff going on, maybe if a family member's ill, or there is maybe some childhood traumas that have been coming up, or separations, in terms of separations, feeling separated from his family for some reason, or feeling, when we're dealing with Pluto, we're dealing with upheaval and feeling like things are happening to you. So there could be a sense of like his sense of structure in his life has been very challenged over the past few years. And so he's been pushed into a time of being more purposeful about what it is that he really stands for, who he really wants in his home and in his family. Maybe he's faced some betrayals in the home or family recently. Who knows how this is manifested? I don't think this is connected directly to Kylie, but maybe she's just been supporting him through some difficulties in his life. And Uranus on the midheaven has not been easy either. It's been opposing his IC as well. So there is some craziness going on in his home life. And I do think he's been feeling a little bit erratic, and things are going to continue to move pretty quickly for him, especially with the North Node now amplifying everything else. The North Node being in the 7th house is a pretty good indication that this is a time in his life where soul level connections are going to be legitimized and are going to become very obvious to him. Now, this could also manifest in terms of career pursuits, like partnerships with directors, partnerships with specific actors, or, even when we're dealing with Saturn, this could be like, maybe he's going to throw his hand in at producing, or maybe trying something a little bit more, when we're dealing with Saturn, it's like maybe stepping into a position of power that he usually would shy away from, or maybe he's accomplishing some big goal of working with a particular director or actor. Either way, the North Node in the 7th house makes him feel like he's living through one of the really big chapters of his life that would go down in his autobiography as like, this was a turning point in my life. And when it comes to Kylie, the North Node in the 7th house could be a time where he realizes like, okay, I think I know what I want, and I think I know what I'm seeking, and maybe it's this girl, and maybe I'm going to solidify this because I feel like a lot of things in my life are falling apart and I need to stand for something. Or he's becoming clearer about what he stands for, and even if that means criticism. When we're dealing with Saturn and Pisces, this is about him learning how to have stronger boundaries about who he is and what he wants within relationships, but also within the way that relationships interact with the rest of his life. Now, I mentioned that Neptune has been in Pisces for about 11 years now, so pretty much his entire adult life, Neptune has been in his 7th house. This means that relationships for him have held this dreamy, unrealistic, kind of escapist quality. Maybe he's someone who has, he has a 5th house stellium. Sometimes there can be some addictions here, and addictions can manifest maybe as like an addiction to love. Maybe he just dates around a lot as a means to escape his life. Who knows? Or maybe keeping people around him that he knows he shouldn't, being overly nice, or maybe surrounding himself with people that he knows kind of push him in not so great directions. When we're dealing with Saturn in the 7th house, this is about him gaining the maturity of recognizing when he needs to kind of see things for what they really are and stop making excuses for others, or stop escaping or using relationships as a mean to escape his reality. Either way, as Neptune leaves the 7th house, he's going to become much more sober and sure of what he's looking for in love in a way that's more realistic, and in a way that allows him to actually do something about it. Because one of the downsides of Pisces is there could be this idealistic quality of like, oh, one day I'll meet my wife. One day maybe I'll meet the right girl. One day maybe I'll settle down and get married. It seems like a lot of these one days are going to be coming 2 days, right? Today I am going to make this happen. And with the North Node here amplifying all of this, I do think that we're going to be seeing major revelations about him and Kylie's relationship. Like I said, he's having huge eclipses that have been navigating his 7th house, and this is inversely tied to his 1st house, because the 1st house, he's got the South Node in Virgo traveling his 1st house. That means, again, he's going through a bit of a personal identity crisis, and I do think he's been going through a bit of a dark night of the soul. I don't think he's been in a great time of his life for the past 3 years. I think he's a little bit overwhelmed, and maybe these structures that have fallen in his life, or these versions of himself that he is letting go of, are giving way to a much more mature and a little bit more, I think it's going to be a very different version of him that we know. When we have the South Node on the ascendant and Uranus on the midheaven, and Saturn's been going through his 7th house, this is like literally your entire personality and your entire identity. You're becoming a different person. When we're talking about South Node in Virgo, this is about releasing a need for curation or obsession with perfection, or an understanding that some sort of ideal that he was aspiring to was not real, or it was a prison. And having, Neptune leaving the 7th house, which has been opposing his ascendant for a long time, it means that he's also releasing some sort of flawed belief that he has to be perfect. There's some sort of release of perfection, and instead an obsession with making something actually happen. So pursuing what he actually wants instead of feeling like he has to live up to certain ideals or unrealistic expectations, whether from himself or from others. The other thing going on here, he's got Jupiter in the 11th house, so he's in an incredible time to promote anything. He, over the last year, I'm sure, has made some incredible connections, some incredible hopes and dreams have been fulfilled in some way with Jupiter in the 11th house. And like I mentioned, the North Node's on his Saturn, so I do think that there is something about maybe working with people he's always wanted to work with, or achieving certain career connections, or partnerships, or having incredible experiences in his work sphere that have made him feel like he's living out a dream, or becoming the version of himself that he thinks is really authentic to who he actually is. Authenticity is something that is coming through for him in his chart a lot, in terms of his transits. And I think that, strangely, there's something about Kylie that speaks to the authentic version of Timothy. And with his Saturn squaring his midheaven, it's interesting, there's something about his connections that are revealing a shadow of his. With Saturn opposing the ascendant, this is about your karmic mirrors will be coming through during this time. And I think the public rejection of Kylie as his partner has maybe made him feel like he has to face a version of himself that's very real, that he has rejected, that's playing out in the kind of partner he's chosen. So maybe, with Kylie being someone who's perceived as unserious, someone who's not particularly prestigious, someone who's not particularly eloquent, this could be, opposing his Virgo rising, squaring his midheaven with Uranus on the midheaven. This is about him feeling like maybe all he's ever wanted is to be seen as prestigious and eloquent and perfect. And he also has so much Capricorn, and realizing that the girl that he likes is none of those things, and he still really likes her, and she reflects the parts of him that are the truest version of him, who isn't always perfect or prestigious or intelligent in every capacity. I think it makes him have to integrate his shadow a little more, in a sense of like, okay, what does it mean about me if I let the world tell me who I can be with? What does it mean about me if I reject this person when they actually reflect back at me some of the truest parts of me, right? And so I do think that there are some, heavy mirrors that have been brought into Timothy's life, to really teach him a lot about who he really is, and who he really is, and how he may be a bit rigid, right, with Virgo, like how he may be a bit perfectionistic or overly critical or overly curated in ways that aren't even who he actually wants to be, and maybe undermine the very ideals that he's aspiring to. And I did see, I don't know if this was this year or last year, that he made a speech about wanting to be the greatest. That really tracks with the Saturn transit to his moon in Saturn. Saturn rules his Capricorn stellium, and also he's now had the North Node enter Pisces. The North Node amplifies desires, and it makes you more greedy, and it can make you more, what's that word, like ambitious, like hungry, right? The North Node in Vedic astrology is the head of the dragon. So the North Node on his Saturn is definitely amplifying his ambition, but it's also amplifying his need for boundaries and how he will achieve those ambitions. So maybe he's becoming even more picky about what jobs he takes, who he works with, what scripts he's interested in, and even what he's willing or not willing to let the public decide about his private life, right? Things like that. Now, what else can I say? Neptune's going to be leaving Pisces next year as well, and Saturn will be leaving Pisces. So I think that we're going to be seeing, I think his life is going to be improving dramatically. I think that after a period of maybe some of the most difficult years of his life, he's going to be feeling a lot more energized, a lot more confident. With South Node transiting his first house, I think we're going to see a version of Timothy that is less afraid to be, with the South Node in trine to all of his Capricorn stellium. I think we're going to see more of that greatest of all time speech, more of a version of him that is okay with showing who he is authentically, what he desires, who he aspires to be, what his standards are, who he aligns himself with. We're going to see a more authentic expression of him, but also maybe a little bit more of a boundaried version of him that is more okay with saying the things he's not okay with, and maybe being a little less parasocial than we've known him to be in the past. Let's see what else I can tell you. He's got Pluto in Aquarius, which has been getting closer and closer to his Venus. So what's her name? Taylor Swift is going through this transit, and we just saw her marry or get engaged to a guy that we're all like, what? Really? This is the one we're going to marry. So I wouldn't be surprised if we had a little bit of a plot twist like that for Timothy as well. Also because the North Node will be entering Aquarius next year. And that's going to start to amplify his Venus. So Venus themes, North Node Venus, that could be marriage, engagement, or that could also be like a really, really big announcement of like a big career role, like a role that maybe he's getting an award. Sometimes Venus is like huge recognition, huge fame. Maybe that lines up with the last Dune movie, who knows. And also, now that I'm thinking about it, I think during his Saturn return, with all these really heavy things that have been going on, it's when he was working on that movie, I don't know the name, about that singer, someone unknown or something like that. And he was talking about how he completely and utterly transformed himself for that role. And I don't think he got nominated for anything. Probably really hurt him. I think that was a huge failure for him. And I think that may have been part of this Saturn moon transit that really has put him through a little bit of a dark night of the soul energy. So that's all I have here for Timothy. You guys let me know what you know about what's going on with him. I don't know a lot about him personally, but do you guys know anything that's coming up for him? Any of his movies or what's been going on in his life, or any personal life details that may have come out about him? Maybe why he's been struggling a bit. So that's all I have for you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.